Hi there. In this video, we're going to have a little break from Blender and take a look at another application that can work within the 3D world, and that is Unreal Engine. So this is a incredibly powerful tool. It is probably as, if not more, overwhelming than Blender is to first comers. But through this video and the following video, I just want to kind of introduce you to some fundamentals that can get you up and running quickly with the tool. There is so much more that we could explore and delve into, but that is something that I would encourage you to do in your own time, should this be of interest to you. So I have Unreal Engine 5 open in front of me. Now there are different versions of the engine available, and updates come quite regularly. This current version that I am working on today is 5.3. I think it's 5.3.2. But the fundamentals here are kind of universal across most versions of Unreal. So when you open up a project, you are presented with this stage, this screen, and this is the kind of the level that we have at our disposal. And by default, we've got this kind of floor area, and we've got this some lights inside of our scene. We've also got this sky dome in front of us, so we've already got some kind of natural world. Now there's different types of levels that you can create, but this is kind of the default one, and the one that we're going to be utilizing today. Over on the the right-hand side of the screen, there's a couple of panels. At the top here is our outliner, and this is quite similar to what we find in Blender, in that this is the list of all of the elements that we have inside of our scene. And from kind of the default standpoint, what we have here is a number of elements that are creating our light, our atmosphere, our sky dome, our floor, and we're not really going to mess with any of those things today. Underneath that, we have our details panel, which again, very similar to Blender, is like our properties panel, where if we select an element on our stage inside of our level, we get all of the properties and details and settings for whatever that is. There are a number of other panels, but we'll get to them a little bit later on. The first thing I'd like us to kind of think about is how to navigate around this world, which again is similar to Blender, but also slightly different. So we can use our 3-button mouse to navigate around the space. We can use our right mouse click. So just single right mouse click allows us to orbit and look around. So we are staying stationary, our camera is staying stationary, and we're able to look up, down, left and right with that right mouse button. Middle mouse button allows us to move up, down, left and right. And then in terms of moving around our space, that's done with the left mouse button. So if we hold down the left mouse button, we actually can walk around the space. And this takes a little bit of getting used to, but if you've played certain games, this might be a familiar type of setup. So left mouse to walk around, middle mouse move up, down, left and right, and right mouse click to orbit around. We can also use our scrolly wheel as well to kind of zoom, moving forwards, moving backwards. So lots of ways of kind of navigating around, and as with most things, just having a play with those things to just get your head around those movements. What we're actually looking at here, though, is as I've opened up the project file, is I'm in this level which is called main. So this is like the default starting level that we would have when we open up a project. But it's always kind of good practice to not work in that main level, to create a new one from scratch. So inside of the project, I can go to File, New Level, and I can choose what type of new level that I want. And I'm going to have this basic level. I'm going to click Create, and then I've got a very similar kind of world here to that main level, but my floor plane is a lot bigger to start with. But essentially, it's the same kind of setup that we had in that main, but this is now a brand new level, and you can see at the top here it says Untitled. So this isn't saved to our project yet. This is just something that we've created. So it doesn't actually exist until we save our current level. So Control or Command S or File, Save Current Level. And then we've got this file structure inside of our project. So inside of the content folder, we're going to create a new level, and we're just going to call this like testing. So now that has saved as a level. So now when I do File Save, Command S or Control S, all of the changes that I make will be updated and saved to this level. So I can navigate and walk around and look around this space, but I haven't actually got any assets or elements inside of here. So where this kind of differs from something like Blender is that there is actually some modeling workflows inside of Unreal, but the way that we're going to utilize it is to use kind of pre-built assets, pre-built elements. And this is more about a kind of staging and layout and world building kind of tool. So I'm going to use some of the primitives that we've got inside of Unreal to demonstrate this to start with. So at the top here, I've got a quickly add to project. And if I come down here, I've got some elements inside of my shapes. So I've got a cube, a sphere, a cylinder, a cone, and a plane. So if I add a cube to my scene, there I now have a cube inside of my world, and physically I can see I've got a cube here on the stage. And then I've got all the properties and details for that cube over here on the right hand side. And again, very similar to Blender is that there's different ways that we can edit and manipulate that content. And we've got some menu bars, some little buttons at the top here that kind of switch between our different means of controlling them. As with Blender though, there are also keyboard shortcuts to work with here. So if we use the QWERTY line of keys, we've got Q becomes our first kind of select, W becomes our move, E becomes our rotate, and R becomes our scale. Now, I always find that frustrating that R is scale and R isn't rotate, but you can quickly kind of jump between those with those Q, W, E, R keys. And you can see that we're changing what tool we have active at the top there, but also the gizmo that is lining up on top of our object also changes. I find actually a more useful way of switching between those things is just the space bar. So if you have an element selected, so I've selected my cube, and if I hit my space bar, I can quickly switch between those move, rotation, and scale options. And they work pretty much how you would expect them to work. Same kind of deal as in Blender, is that we can click on these axes and move those things around. Or in the rotation, I can choose which axes, which angle I want to rotate it on. Command Z or Control Z works the same as any other application if we want to go back and undo things. One thing I quite like about the Unreal interface is you see that when I'm in this rotation mode, you see I'm actually getting a measurement coming up on the display to say by how many degrees I am rotating it by, which is quite useful. Then when it comes to scale, obviously we've got kind of 4 options here. The one in the middle kind of scales things uniformly, so we can scale things on all axes at the same time. Or I can start clicking on each of these axes here and start pushing and pulling them around on their different either X, Y, or Z. So I'm going to make a little scene here based on that one cube. So I've kind of scaled it up to make it into this little tower, quite a tall tower. So then I can move that element around inside of my scene. Another useful thing is like duplication, so making copies of things. So if I wanted multiple towers such as this, I could bring in another cube and then scale that up and move it around. But I could also use things like Control-C, Control-V to make a copy, or Command-C, Command-V if you're on a Mac to make a copy. But also Alt-clicking allows you to make copies. So I've got this element selected, and if I hold down the Alt or Option key, click and drag on one of these axes, it will then go and make a copy of that element. So I can start kind of creating, I don't know what I'm creating here, just a collection of pillars here, and I can look at them in 3D space. Another important thing to kind of get used to is the real-time engine that we're working with here. So we are looking at we're constantly in render mode, but sometimes the higher end render mode might be putting more pressure. Well, we'll be putting more pressure on your computer systems. So there's something that we can do up in the settings in the top right hand corner. We come down to engine scalability settings. See, there's lots of different options inside of here. And when I'm working, I actually quite like to switch this to medium. So it still looks good, and we can still see how light is interacting and affecting our scene, but it's putting less processing power on our computer when we're actually building. And then when it comes to actually exporting or showcasing the work, we can then bump it up to these epic and cinematic settings. So you can have kind of say, okay, I want it on medium, but I want my shadows to be epic. So you can kind of customize those things if you wish, or if you want them to be completely all the way on certain settings, just click on the word at the top. But medium is kind of a good place to have it when you're initially working. Another thing which is also potentially putting some pressure on our systems is this real-time engine, which we can kind of see in our sky at the top here, that our clouds, can you see that they're actually moving? So we've got this this effect going on in those clouds to give us this idea of there be some sort of atmosphere, some sort of wind, and that's lovely, and in this case isn't putting loads of pressure on my system, but just to kind of ensure that my computer is working as efficiently as possible, and come over to the side here and go to this burger menu on the side and untick real time, or Control or Command R is the keyboard shortcut for that. Everything still looks good, just that these are now frozen in position. We haven't got that real-time animation going on. So everything's kind of a little bit zippier now. One other thing that we can do in our scenes is to control where the light is coming from. So we have this kind of dynamic sky set up, established, and somewhere, if I look around, there we go, there is my sun in my sky. So this is creating kind of real-time lighting and shadow effects that's all based on where that light is positioned, where the sun is positioned in our sky. But we can control that sun by using the keyboard shortcut of Control and L. So to control the light, Control L. If I hold down Control and L, I get this little gizmo appear on my screen. And here, when I now move my mouse around, this is quite sensitive, so it takes a little kind of practice to get your head around this. but I'm now orbiting and moving my sun around in the sky. Can you see now I can reposition my sun, and that's having a dynamic effect on the lighting of my scene and quite dramatically where those shadows are positioned. But we can also bring that sun down lower to the horizon, and then because of the atmosphere that we've got set up, it actually creates these kind of sunset warm tones to the sky. If I go beyond the horizon, I'm then into darkness. But I could have the sun rising, I could have the sun high up in the sky, so midday, harsh shadows and lights, or I could have the sun setting over the side. So quite dynamically and quite quickly, and relatively easy once you get your head around that that gizmo. So Control L and moving your mouse around, you can have some quite quick, responsive, dynamic effects with those lighting conditions. So simple things like moving, rotating, scaling, these are all things that are transferable knowledge from other 3D applications and relatively straightforward here inside of Unreal. One last thing to show you in this video guide is that we've got a very important panel down the bottom here called this content drawer. And if we open that up, this shows us the contents of our project. It's kind of a file management system, but it's a way of kind of getting to different assets or elements or pieces of our larger project. So on the left-hand side, we have a file structure. So when you create an Unreal project, it actually makes, rather than just a single project file that you would have from something like Blender, this actually makes a folder with loads of subfolders and lots of sub-files inside of it. That's why potentially the first time you open up Unreal, it takes quite a long time to process and create those projects, because it's making all of those folders. But here inside the content drawer, we have access to all of the things inside of there. I've got a few of extra things in here, but the main kind of gist here is that we've got this content folder, and this is where we have our levels that we have created. So that's the main one is the default one that we started with, and then this testing level is the one that I've created here. If I save this with Control S or File, Save Current Level, if I then kind of open up this main level, it will then switch to that. So all of those things are still there, and then if I wanted to then get to the level that I was working on, I can jump to that from this content drawer. So you can have multiple levels inside of a single project file. Then when we get a little bit further into it, we've got some starter content or any asset packs. We'll talk more about asset packs in the next video. All of those pieces and parts of those asset packs are kind of accessible inside of that content drawer. So the content drawer, there's button down the top, and the keyboard shortcut to bring that up is Control and Spacebar, and it pops that up and away inside of our user interface. So they are the fundamental kind of working logistics and tools to start navigating, adding content, editing that content, and manipulating the light conditions inside of our world. So hope that's been useful. In the next video, I'm going to explore a particular asset pack and show you how we can utilize Unreal to create some interesting scenes made up of those asset elements. Okay, so thanks very much. Do take care. Bye bye.